You're ready.
I'm recording.
All right, so we
David, I
will,
hope I'm not out of order, but first of all, I'm too young to answer any general questions about what was going on in Noe. I have, my personal thing is, I think I have a unique perspective to talk about the Danforth and the Danforth Airport. So my experience is the Danforth Airport, 35 to 40. You may not be into airplanes, so stop me on that.
Oh, we all love an airplane.
We rented Forrest Hamlin's house, 2 houses up here. And coming back here is like old memories, because I would come down here to get books. I said earlier, read the Bobbsey Twins or whatever. The field is somewhat pretty much the same as it was in 35 and 40. No paved runways. There were 2 hangars at that time. And the only planes that really were based there was Mr. Danforth's planes. And I can pass on at people's leisures. I've got pictures of the airplanes.
thank you.
So in 35, we moved down here, and Dad was flying a beautiful Northrop Delta. It was all aluminum. I'm talking 35 now. Cruised at 200 miles an hour as fast as a DC-3, and it was Mr. Danforth's private plane. It had a long couch in it so we could take naps. It had a toilet. It was quite something. So that was the first airplane. And then in the winter of 38, the Delta was burned up in a Miami hangar fire. So they had to find a replacement plane quick for the summer of 38, and they bought a Stinson Reliant, much smaller plane. Pictures are being circulated. They kept the Stinson for a couple of years, and then they bought what they call a Howard DGA, again a small plane but faster. Now, there was a stable on the airport at that time. I don't know whether the Danforths created the stable or it was there before, but as I recall, it was about 8 or 10 horses could be accommodated at the stable, and there were a couple of stable hands. There was a rink, there was hurdles and stuff. And Hilmer Danforth tried to get the kids into horseback riding. I don't think Mr. D ever went horseback. He's a golfer. And one of the experiences Mother and I was the only child, Mother and I had was they didn't have enough people to exercise the horses on the airport. So we would be invited to go over and exercise the horses. And I'm not a horse person, but I think they call something like a Western horse, which is bigger than a pony, but not as big as a full horse. And so I don't remember the name of the horse. But one day I remember we were at the stable, and it's not all flying stories. And I was trying to get onto the Western pony, and I fell. And the stable, I fell down, and it didn't do any damage, but except to my psyche. And I cried, I guess, and didn't want to get back on the horse. Well, my mother and the stable hand said, "You got to get back on the horse." So they forced me to get back on the horse, and that was fine. It was riding, whatever. There were no basic support facilities at the airport. The only thing they had was a windsock on the hangar. No lighting, no radio, anything like that. So my father, they did a lot of flying in the summer from Boston down here and back. And so he felt he needed some support system. And he had bought, does any of you, us folks remember the coil radios? It was a 3-component radio, shortwave, and you could get the federal weather forecast. But to change the band on it, you had to put a coil in. And just as a side note, I remember listening to the Navy talking about the rescue of the submarine Squalus up in Isla Shoals in 37 or 38. So Dad had to develop sort of a separate support system. And on our house up here, my father had pointed out to my mother things to check the weather. So if the weather was murky, questioning, he'd call Mother and say, can you see the church? Can you see this? Can you see that? Is there fog? And she, I guess, got pretty accurate and pretty good. And then he'd fly by the seat of their pants. The Mystic Lake was a wonderful place to come down, go over the canal. You had a big thing to organize yourself so you could get up over Race Lane into the airport. On the north, is this too much?
No.
One more.
The Northrop was my dad's pride and joy. It was a 775 horse, twin banked diesel radial engine, but it seemed to shoot fire out of the exhaust because Dad had to turn the engine over with the magneto off, electricity off, fill the aviation gas into the cylinders, and then at the right time he'd flip the magneto and flame would come out of this thing. You know, I'm 7 or 8 looking at this flame like this, but the one of the stable hands would come down and stand with a fire cart. I don't think there was ever any real fire, but they were standing by, and that was that. For night flying, my dad would call my mother and say, get a hold of Marion Odence over in Prince Road and park your cars here and here, and when I come in at night, I'll circle the airport, and then you can put the car lights on and you can see where to land. So it was pretty primitive stuff, but he was a World War I pilot and and spent 10 years in the Army Air Corps, so he was kind of used to that.
Did he get to France?
What?
Did he get to France?
Did he what?
Get to France.
France?
Yeah.
So that's where they're fighting.
Dad graduated from Boston College in 1917, and he didn't get overseas in World War I.
He was lucky.
But he got in, he was commanding officer of because he stayed in the active Army Air Corps Reserve. And in the winter of 1942, he was transferred to England, was commander of a transport group just outside of London. But anyway, so the plane, we started circulating the picture.
Yeah, it's going around now.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So after the fire, Dad, we had this picture of my father crying. Here's a almost 50-year-old guy crying over some melt aluminum in the Northrop down in Miami. I mean, he was sometimes in the middle of the night he'd get up. I don't know that I turned the magneto off, and he'd drive all the way out to the airport. It was always off. So they had to find a quick replacement, and they got a Stinson Reliant, which was a much smaller come-down plane, not as fast, and they had that for 1939 to 38, 39. And then they got a slightly faster plane, a Howard DGA, for 1940, and that's where my story ends. But one flight in the Stinson, Hilmer Danforth came over with Teddy, their youngest son, and Teddy's Hill Prep School visiting roommate, and said to Dad, fly the boys down to the New York World's Fair, 1939. Of course, he had to stay with him and go to the fair and then fly back. So I'm up front with, she said, why don't you take little Frank down? And so Dad had me, and I'm up front, and the boys are in the back seat. And nice weather, nice summer weather, flying down. And there's two things I remember of the World's Fair. I would have been 9. One was Esther Williams doing a water ballet, if any of you are old enough to remember Esther Williams. And in the U.S. exhibit building was an early prototype of a TV camera.
Really?
I mean, it was about like that, you know, and it wasn't much, but it was, so now it's 4 o'clock, time to fly back to Danforth Airport. We take off for Floyd Bennett Field from Long Island, and what, nice summer day and everything, I'm up front. And all of a sudden, my father's getting a little antsy. There's clouds going by, you don't see much. And of course, he had no radio finder or anything. He had to fly by the seat of his pants. He had practiced it, and he flew low over the Sagamore Bridge, and then set a compass course for Mystic Lake and the airport. And we were flying about 50 feet off the ground. You could just barely see the ground. Well, fortunately in Cape, there's no high-rise built, at least not in the 30s, or trees or hills or anything. And it was like a piece of cake. He just come down to the airport, the lake, up over the lake, and that was it. All right, so I've talked about the lighting, I've talked about that. Let me see if there's any
What
other.
about the biplane?
What's that, please?
The biplane.
What
The
about it?
Well, are you gonna tell about that? Because they have a sign out there, they can still do that. No?
When Dad was flying Danforth plane, there was no
Oh,
biplane.
Okay.
Now, that's another story.
Yeah.
Dad took us up in Boston Airport, but that's another story.
Well, that's-
Just give me a minute or so, so I've really missed anything. For the radio.
Why are you looking, Sam? You said you didn't know whether the stable was there. I wonder if Kathy Wright, who knows a lot about the history of the airport before you came, was the stable, when the stable put in? Do you have any idea?
I don't know.
Your uncle,
My great uncle Fred Bill.
he didn't put a stable in there, did he?
Well, he
Because
has-
their house is on the 149.
Yes.
So if they had a stable, it would have been behind the house there. But they probably had horses, didn't they?
They had horses and cows. I think they had pigs.
Yeah?
They also grew things. I don't know whether they grew them commercially or just for themselves.
I heard they grew turnips.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. But it was the Bill Dannel farm, and Fred Bill's brother-in-law, Jack Dannel, ran it with him, and I think they sold farm equipment as well as actually doing commercial farming. But I don't know exactly when they started the farm, but on Uncle Fred's 1918 draft registration, he says he's a farmer in West Barnstable. So I guess the house was actually in West Barnstable and the fields were in Marston's Mills. I'm not quite sure where the line is.
Right on the line there.
The interesting
Thank
thing
you,
is,
Kathy.
I don't
Yeah.
think the airport's changed much. I mean, one of the hangars blew down. The Danforths added that windmill. And in those days, it had the vanes or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether they used it for, but let's see if I got anything else on fine.
What about the racetrack? Remember that?
Yeah, I
Tell us
knew
about
of it. I knew of it. There was like a sandbank, and I was told that they had motorcycle races and stuff. But when the Danforths owned the airport, that wasn't going on. I don't think they were having races there. A couple of selected notable people landing at the Danforth airport. The one that I think the most of is Spencer Tracy and his son. It turns out in 1937, one of the first movies I ever saw was Captain's Courageous. And Spencer Tracy was one of the actors. Freddie Bartholomew was the kid that fell off the liner. And so that was, I went to the Oysterville Theater to see it. And then later in the summer, who does Dad bring in as a passenger going to visit Mr. Danforth was Spencer Tracy and his son. And his son was like 15 or 16, and of course the son lived in California, and he had developed a monthly newsletter for young people, so I got it for a couple of years. There was Amelia Earhart, there was Jimmy Doodle, and there's a lot that I didn't know of. So it was a very, very interesting time for my father and my family. I was an only child. The airport had a lot of meaning to us. One last thing, I think in 39 or 40, we stayed later into October, and we had to give up the Hamlin house. And so Mr. D let us stay at that bungalow, which is on the northeast side adjacent, was to the airport. I suppose the bungalow's still there, isn't it? It's a traditional Cape Cod,
Bob?
No.
right next to the airport.
No.
I don't think so.
I think, was it on the other side of Race Lane? Was it
No.
on-
Oh, yeah, it was,
It's on the-
if
on
we
the
take,
pond side.
if we take 149 past the Danforth Airport,
Yeah,
at the end of the Danforth Airport was this traditional, what I call a Cape Cod bungalow. It had no central heating, so in October we had to have portable kerosene heaters. Oh, and did I tell this group about the finished bath? All right, here's my last one, unless you have questions for me. Across the street from the bungalow there was a Finnish family. And I think they had a small farm.
The Altos.
Altos.
What?
Altos.
the Altos.
The Altos.
Yeah.
I don't know the name, but anyway,
That's it.
they had
That's it.
they had a son that was about my age. So we got on the school bus together and stuff. And one day, the mother came over and knocked on the door and got my mother and say, will Frank be able to come to our Saturday night steam bath? And my mother took offense. He's clean, he gets a bath every day or so. And then she realized that it was very much of an honor. So I had one night, they have the male and the females, and I went to the male steam bath at that farmhouse across the road.
Very
Any
good.
questions?
No, that's
or-
great. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That's,
I don't,
you say you lived in Forrest Hamlin's house. Did
I
you ever
think
meet Forrest Hamlin?
Did you ever meet him?
Did you ever meet him?
oh, yeah, I guess I must have. He was our, well, I probably met him, but he had a brother that had a seafood boat rental business in Prince Cove.
Leonard.
That was
Huh?
yours.
Leonard.
Leonard?
Yeah, but
Leonard.
were they brothers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't Leonard and Forrest
I-
work together? No? It was just
I think
Leonard?
Forrest was in construction.
No, he
There was a
was
big sandbank in the
he
back
was
of
a
that.
fisherman.
He was a fisher.
Shellfish.
Forrest was?
Yeah, but
Not
he
Cyrus.
was always also a mason.
Oh.
Leonard was a builder, wasn't he?
Leonard was a builder. Yeah.
And they rebuilt the grist mill. Do you remember the grist mill?
On the airport? No.
No, right there,
Right down here.
right down here.
The corner of 149.
But I do remember, seemed to me where I had to come down Main Street,
Yeah.
go towards the airport, and there was a post office in a farm.
Gifford Farm.
Yeah.
What?
It was the
Gifford
Gifford
Farm.
Farm.
Gifford.
Do I have that more or less right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there it
Yeah.
is.
My
Across from
grandmother
fire
ran
station.
that post office. She was the postmistress.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
then when she
Did we not get-
retired, Lena's brother took it over.
Did
was
we
only
get mail
18.
at home, or did we have to go to the post office to get our mail?
Yes. Yeah.
You have to go to
That's
the
where
post
it was.
office.
It was that little building. Yep. They didn't waste anything. When the post office, when Junior decided he'd put the post office down where his father had a store, they took the post office up the hill and made it part of the house up there.
Oh.
They didn't waste much.
We had a high school maids at the house for the summer. And I only mentioned this, they got paid $1 a day. And 1 day off, uniform, and of course, room and board, and 1 day off. And they were the Nickerson sisters from Katuitt. Yeah. But we did, a couple of years before coming here, we rented, I think, the Barlow House in Main Street in Katuitt.
Which house?
I'm not sure, Barlow.
Barlow?
It was a traditional, again, I'm back to traditional Cape with the
Yeah.
narrow stairs going up and the painted floors.
Oh,
Did you go to school here?
I started school a number of times.
Where was the school?
What?
Where was the school? Where's it
In
look-
Marston's Mill, I just went across where the church is, through a little woods, and I think the actual school is on 120, is on 28. And I don't remember about the teachers or anything, but what I do remember was the very elegant playground whirligigs and teeter boards and stuff like that. And
What was the teacher's name?
I don't know what any teachers.
Huh?
Well, I remember I only went for a month. And then I would transfer to another school.
Oh.
Because we would leave the Cape at end of September or October, or early October. And I was all done with Marston's Middle Schools until the next year. And I don't remember having any real school chums either. Most of my playmates were the daughters of the Erdentz family, which rented the other Hamlin house on Prince Street. Prince, it's the one that had the seafood boat rental business. He rented his winter house.
That would be Forrest.
And the other thing about Prince Cove, not to carry on too
Oh,
long
no,
here,
that's
is
good. Yeah. Go
Good.
ahead.
We can go on
No.
with the
there was
other
only
members.
there were only rowboats to outhalls in Prince Cove. I remember there was one lobster boat at the end of the cove that had been wrecked. No marinas or anything like that. And it was a wonderful place to play.
I think we can go ahead with other people's
Well, thank
memories.
you.
Yeah, that's
Thank
great,
you.
Sam.
Thank you,
Thank
Sam.
you very much. Yeah.
I'll bet this reminds Lena of some of the things when she was.
May I ask one question?
Yeah.
Does anybody relate to the Jones family living on Main Street?
We're here.
Yes,
Family members, or?
yeah.
Jones, yeah.
Yeah, she is a Jones.
They
I
had
have
a
a
daughter, Olive. Olive
Yeah.
Jones.
Yeah.
Am I repeating myself, Dave?
No, no.
Here? And she was about 3 years older than I,
Yeah.
and she liked to come over on the plaything. And my wife said I'm not supposed to say this, but we decided to play, she decided to play master and slave. And both of us wanted to be the slave. Some strange psychology to this. And once or twice, she persuaded me and herself to get undressed. There was no physical contact, but it was my earliest childhood memory of seeing a young girl totally naked. So now I've done it.
You're gonna have to look that up.
That's
And
where the
Dave,
editorial comes in.
I forgot one other thing. September 21st, hurricane, we were still in the Cape. And my mother and her parents had driven to Plymouth for the day, where the Plymouth landed and whatever. And I went to school. And we had no maid or anything at that point, so I came home and was alone. And my mother said she was the last or the next to last car that was allowed to go over the Sagamore Bridge because of the hurricane. It was worse down in Connecticut, Rhode Island, but so they almost didn't get back home. So anyway, they arrived. They had lobsters, but we had no electricity. But it was a gas stove. And my grandfather went out to his car radio to see what was going on. And coming off a Boston radio station was Aviator Francis Crowley has gone missing. My father. Well, about 3 hours later, he called and said, "Oh, he's all right."
Yeah.
Great.
That was the 38 hurricane,
Yeah.
you remember
Yeah.
that?
Oh,
Lena?
yeah, yep.
Didn't do as much damage as the next one.
No, it didn't.
Well, the one that really took the beat was New London and Eastern Connecticut.
Yeah,
And then it sort of swung up and in and then out,
Yeah.
I think.
yeah,
Yeah, the 38 hurricane, New England,
yeah,
that was a bad
And,
one.
yeah.
and to completely finish it, David, the Princess Cove, that family had 2 daughters, Phyllis and Connie.
Yes. Yeah.
And he had a rowboat business, and then he had about a 18-foot inboard skiff. I'm almost done.
Yeah, okay.
And he would tow the rowboats out to Katuitt Bay, I guess, right? Fishing.
Yeah.
And I got pretty good at it. They had just wooden stakes. There were no buoys or anything like that. And you had to follow it out to Osterville, Katuitt Bay. And I used to love to run his powerboat with him right there, of course. So I had some just wonderful, wonderful childhood memories of Marston's Mills, and thank you for putting up with my long dissertation.
Thank you.
No, those are wonderful.
Thank you, thank you.
And I have left notes with David
Yeah.
of the airport, and I would love to see somebody write a sequel to the earlier gristmill talk about the airport before the Dampers bought it.
Maybe we can get Kathy to do
What?
some of that.
What's that?
Kathy Wright, who's sitting behind you, great uncle, ran the farm there before the
Well,
airport.
if anybody wants to take my notes and write something about it, I'd be willing to collaborate.
And I've
I
got
don't
it.
wanna write it. Thank you ever so much. Any questions?
Thank
Thank you very much.
Well, Lena, what does this remind you of?
We always had a good time here. Plus, I was born here 94 years ago,
Almost 95.
almost 95.
And who's counting?
And I was born right up here on 145 Main Street, River Road, where my nephew lives now. And I knew all of these people because we were all kids together. We grew up together. And we always had a good time around here. I remember my grandfather used to sell milk all around, and he used to get us little kids, he used to put us in a wagon if it was warm weather, and then he'd put us in a sleigh when it was cold weather. We'd deliver milk all up and down the street here.
Wow.
That was a shell road. River Road was a shell road for years.
Really?
Yeah, a shell road. Yeah.
That's a lot of shells they have left over.
Yeah, but it was.
A lot of clams and oysters eaten.
It was a shell road. Then goes my father owned the cash market down here for years. And my brother bought it and he ran it. And when I got out of school, he made me work in it.
I have a question for you.
What?
I have a question for you, sir. Driving towards the airport on 149, Mystic Lake's on the left. Was there a duck farm there or something?
Duck farm's further up.
Yeah, it's further up.
Not between here and the airport?
Yep.
Yeah.
The old farm that you talked about with the post office, then there was a pond. Beyond that pond, there was land, then the Clear Lake
So
Duck Farm.
They weren't on Mystic Lake.
No.
No, it was
Hamlin
on,
Pond.
what do you call
Hamlin
that
Pond.
Hamlin Pond.
Hmm?
What was the name of the pond?
It's Hamlin's farm
Hamlin.
now.
Yeah, wasn't it Clear Lake?
Yeah, Clear
We
Lake.
called it Clear Lake Duck Farm.
Yeah, Clear Lake.
That pond is now Hampton's Pond. It
Yeah.
had several names.
Clear when the ducks were-
Grigson's Pond when my mother was growing up.
No wonder we had
Yeah.
But thank you again.
Could I ask a question? Lena, was
Lena, where did you start school?
Jim, maybe you can ask for us. I'm wondering, Lena, what your family connection is with the Goodspeed House? was your
That
grandmother
was
who
my,
lived there?
that was my, great aunt.
Great aunt,
You have to
okay.
leave early.
Thank you,
Goodspeed
'cause I know there
House,
was
yeah.
a Jones Goodspeed
Yeah,
connection
yeah,
there.
Yep, Grandma Jones Goodspeed,
Awesome.
yep.
Oh,
Thank you.
Did you start school in the same school I did?
I started school right down here,
Oh, you did, when my
Mhm.
mother started.
yep.
Yeah. Used to be a school right down where the gas
down here,
station
yeah.
is.
oh.
But
A little spot, yeah, I think,
when
I
I
think
came
we got
along,
it in,
the school that's now the funeral parlor
Yeah.
had been built.
yeah.
That's where but you went back to school there, didn't you?
What's that?
Did you ever go to the other school that's now the funeral parlor?
Yeah, yeah,
What grade did you go there?
I don't remember.
Can't remember.
No, I don't remember.
What teachers do you remember? Remember any of them?
None of them.
Lasting impression.
They weren't memorable.
They didn't stick in my mind.
So the war came along.
Uh-huh.
Now what happened to all of the young men?
They were all in the National Guard, and they shipped them right down to Texas, a whole bunch of them.
Then they sent them overseas?
Yep, they sent them overseas.
Most of them went, where did they go to, some of them went over to England, didn't they?
Some went to England, my husband went to France.
Your husband, was one of those. He was in the National Guard
Yeah.
and then over
Oh, yeah, they sent them over there.
to England.
And they spent quite a lot of time down in Texas first.
Where their training
Mhm.
training
Yeah.
took place.
Yeah.
And Vivian's husband was involved
Yep.
with that. He
What?
involved with the National Guard before the war.
No, he was never in
Wilbur.
the National Guard.
So how did he sign up?
Before the war, he had taken a course at, I think, Boston, what was called Boston Airport at the time, as an airplane mechanic, and he passed it. Why he never went into it, I don't know, but then the war came along. He was only 20, but he saw the draft breathing down his neck, and he knew he didn't want to go in the Army, so he joined the Air Corps. And he was one of those kids that loved the air, to see the airplanes.
Loved the what?
He was one of those kids who loved to see airplanes, and when he and his friends as little kids saw an airplane go over, they would quickly hop onto their bicycles and pedal as fast as they could
My,
down to the
fa-
airport to see the planes. And
My,
he
father-
spent a lot of time down there, so you might have known him.
Oh.
What's the name?
His name was Wilbur Cushing.
No.
No.
Let me remember, I'm only
And,
5 to 10.
and he and his friend, senior moment here, Lapham. Not
Buddy?
Buddy, but
Buddy?
the other one.
What?
The other one.
Dana?
Dana.
Dana. He and Dana would go down there and spend time talking to us.
My dad flew
So
the
he may
US
have-
mail from Boston to Newark, with stopping in Hartford, both ways. And his lucky number was 13. He was born in May 13. And so the young kids in those days, they wanted to associate with flyers,
Yes.
and they established a 13 club, and they started painting 13 on the bonds and whatever, and Dad would come by and, I'm told, wiggle his wings and say, okay, I
We
know
have to
that's yours.
remember that to see a plane fly over in those days was something, you know, you get all excited.
Still
I remember
is.
kids, we'd
Yeah.
run out of the house and wave.
Well, I mean, I did a lot of flying because my father was,
But anyway,
Yeah.
Wilbur joined up with the Air Force and eventually went to England with the 8th Air Force.
that's where my dad was.
Yeah, he was not flight crew, he was ground crew. But he was over there for, what, 3 years? Until the war ended anyway. And then he flew home in an old B-24 that had seen the war and made it. They came into the one in Connecticut.
Bradley.
Bradley.
Yeah.
got out of the plane, kissed the ground. And then he heard somebody say, "What you doing here, boy?" He looked up and there's Cop Hinckley.
Yeah.
So Cop Hinckley is down there with the MPs. That was his introduction to home.
So when the boys came home after the war, the place really livened up. That was when the men's club was created. It was really former veterans
Most of them, yes.
who really got that going after the war. Can you tell us a little bit about the? You were around by then, Vivian. So
Yeah.
tell us about the men's club.
Well, I don't know too much about it, except they had the building next door. And they had a ball club, baseball club.
Mhm.
My husband didn't play on it, but almost every other young fellow did. He only got called in when they needed him. I guess he wasn't very good. Anyway, and they also, in the wintertime, had a volleyball team that they played over at the old USO building in Hyannis. And Wilbur used to play on that. Otherwise, what happened? I can't remember much about after that. A lot of building going on
Yeah.
at that
And
point.
your husband is involved in that with the
Well,
A.G.
My
Griffin.
husband's stepdad was a mason contractor, and so my husband naturally became a mason. And during the summer months, he hired almost every young guy in town at some point in time. Yeah.
Well, Claire, tell us, what do you remember about?
During the war, I started school in '39, first grade, and it had moved up to what the funeral parlor is now, and it was on 28. First and second grade one room, third and fourth in another, fifth and sixth in another, upstairs to the nurses and principal, and in the what became our library before I left sixth grade, the kids in town that had trouble learning, probably learning disabilities now, but they didn't know about them then. They were all pushed in that room. One teacher, God love her, I don't know how she taught them. They were there from first grade till they were 16. And we had a man teacher, Charlie House, teaching sixth grade when I was in third and fourth. And he organized a rink, a boxing rink out in the playground. And we could either play or we could watch those boys learning to box. Some of the Perry boys were involved in that. Remember that? And some of them went on to the Golden Gloves, but that kept some of those older boys that were still in school and having trouble learning, but the law said they had to be there till they were 16, and they didn't know what they know now to help the kids. Kind of a sad time, really, when you think about it. But during the war, we all had to take lunch. The government went around, and the poor people that were considered living in a poor area, which we were called a poor area. We were not a poor area. Everybody had their own farms, they had plenty of food. People had cows, or milk wasn't that expensive. It was hard for us to understand why we were called poor, because we saw poverty. But most of us weren't that poor, that we didn't have the essentials. And we were happy. We didn't know we were poor. But anyway, to make a long story short, the government, we were one of the schools the government picked to give free lunches to. And you had to take them whether you wanted to or not. And we had an old gentleman, sweet old gentleman from Camet Road, colored man, his name was Mr. Kearney. He was in charge of the food program. And that went on for quite a few years. I don't know when they stopped it, Maureen.
Well, we had it when we went to school.
You did, because you're
Yeah.
10 years younger than me.
Yeah,
And you still have it?
we had it,
Well,
and
it's-
Mrs. Moore was the principal, and there's no dickering. You either took the hot lunch all week long, or your mother made your lunch.
Yes.
It was not, I'll eat this, and
That's
then
right.
that. No, so, and I think milk was a nickel, but I remember Mr. Kearney made the most delicious macaroni and cheese.
And then the school lunch program stayed.
Yeah.
And was run by the town, and you could either take it or bring lunch, changed. But during those war years, everybody had to take it. They thought we were so broke, that was the only way we'd get lunch. That's about what it amounted to. But that's
Lena,
the
what
way
did you
the
do during the
government
war?
works.
What did I do during the war? I worked up the Otis Air Force.
What were you doing?
I was in the motor pool,
You're driving
driving,
Jeeps, are they Jeeps?
driving Jeep forklift.
In the Marston Mills
Hmm.
historic book, there's a picture of Aunt Lena
Yeah.
behind the wheel.
We got a great picture of this in the book.
Yeah.
Where did you go to high school, Lena? In Hyannis, where I
Hyannis,
went?
yeah.
Barnstable High.
I worked out during the war up there. The
What
motor
does it
pool.
pay?
What?
What'd they pay you?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. We got good pay, that was good pay up there. I don't remember what it was.
She always tells us the only time she worked outside the home was when the boys went to war. She went to work.
I've got a picture of you. Oh, there's one in the
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
You know.
Yeah.
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 That's great.
Yeah, she can probably tell you more.
You have the memory, not me.
But after the war, we saw Marston's Mills change.
Yeah.
A lot of new people moved in, houses were being built. When Lena and I grew up, you know all your neighbors.
Yeah.
You knew everybody on your street.
Now you
Different
don't know
village.
anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Don't know anybody anymore. You go to the post office, a lot of people in there,
Yep.
nobody says hello, and you don't know who they are.
That's why you have to come to the library.
Yeah.
We also say hello.
Cheers
And the
bar.
government
Yeah.
sent supplies to the post office. Government paid for it. People could come in, I don't know if they had a ticket or how they, if you could just go in and say, I need food. But remember that, Lena? They
Yeah.
had food
Yeah.
right from the government that people that needed it
Yeah.
could get.
Well, at the Gifford Farm, at the Gifford Farm, didn't they give out food there?
Well, Grandpa would put some of the extra food in because he had more than he could use, but the government supplied a lot of the food. I don't know how people, did they have tickets or something? They came in and maybe they were on welfare. I don't know. They had welfare then.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So how did the, what did you raise on the farm? When you were growing up?
What did we raise?
Yeah,
Grandma had a whole field of strawberries.
strawberries.
Yeah. I was allowed to help pick them, and they were sold up in East Falmouth. Also, she put some out on our front lawn to sell, and she paid me 5 cents a box. That was a lot of money then. Besides that, all kinds of produce. Grandpa had an asparagus patch. That was, that's perennial. And then he had all the veggies. My grandmother canned. She raised baked beans, soldier beans. They were put to dry in a big window that she had in the back room. There wasn't much they didn't have in that garden, and there wasn't much my grandmother didn't can. That was part of things then. And she had 5 daughters to help her.
To help.
Grandma had 11 children, 6 boys and 5 girls. Then she had us grandkids coming along.
Yeah.
It was a happy childhood. Very happy childhood.
Barbara came along later and then interviewed a lot of the old characters. She started a project which is really a treasure for our historical society because it's got interviews with most of the people are long gone. But Barbara, what are some of your recollections of stories that?
Asking you.
So,
Well, I guess we bought in 1965. We were staying at the old Yarmouth campgrounds and renting a house from a friend of ours. And we just drove around and looked at a lot of places, and And we sort of liked Marston's Mills because it was quiet. I think we had lived in a lot of places that were very loud. My husband was a New Yorker and I was in Philadelphia, so we had a lot of noise. And we wanted something. He retired in 1971, and we wanted some place that was quiet to live in. And I think there were 995 people in Marston's Mills when we bought
Is
in
that
65.
really? Wow.
I don't know whether they're 10,000 today.
Yep, that's right,
Mhm.
that's right.
So it grew. And I've watched it grow, and sometimes I get very upset because I liked it the way it was when I first came here.
You and me too.
Grossman's started this Sand Shores Association, and they put ads in the New York, in the Boston papers, and they sold a quarter of an acre for $500. So quite a few people came down and bought several acres. Yes, and the Pantons and who else was it that? I can't think of the name now. Two families bought 4 or 5 lots. Harrigan's, that's what it was. He's dead now. But, so many people have died because it's been a long time since we moved in there. And it was very impressive at first because they had yellow pillars, brick pillars on either side of the road. And they had Sand Shores written in metal letters. So, you know, and of course it was rather elegant driving through there off of 149, which at that time you could walk on. You could walk to the village, or you could walk up to the airport. My father walked to the airport lots of mornings. He would stop and talk to Barbara Fuller because she had a vegetable garden, and they got to be quite friendly. And he was in his 80s when you couldn't possibly. You can't even cross the street now, let alone walk on it. But it wasn't a bad walk down to the village. And of course, Frank McCluskey had a nice store down there, and we had he sold meat, and he had a slab of marble that he cut the meat on, and eventually somebody in the department of health, yes, told him that he couldn't do it. Well, there's nothing better than a slab of marble to cut meat on because it has no pores in it. So I don't think so much of the Department of Health. Anyway, it was very nice, and we had the people in Sand Shores were mostly summer people when we first came. And but everybody was very friendly. Everybody talked with everybody, and today that's not happening.
They're doing this.
That's right. Yes. So the camaraderie that was in our in St. Shores and the village itself is gone.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, people are
So
scared to
it's
death.
very sad. It's very sad. And I don't know what the children are going to turn out to be like. If you don't talk and if you don't look around and see what's going on in the world and breathe deeply, you're really just an automaton. You're nothing.
Good point, very good point.
So it's been a very lovely village to live in, and everybody has been very friendly. That is, the people that are here have been very
Well, thank you all for your recollection. Maybe we got some questions in the audience.
Yeah,
of people
sure.
who could.
Fire away.
David, I think we have to think about taking our hike back to Connecticut. It's a couple hours, and,
Yeah.
but I gotta say, on my personal behalf, it would have been a privilege to come and see the enthusiasm And this library, which really isn't basically changed, they've added, but it's all as I remember, sort of. It's just terrific. And the other thing is, you know, at 7 or 8, my mother would let me walk all the way over to Prince Cove. You know, you wouldn't let a kid today do that.
Couldn't get across 28.
Yeah, right.
Mary, this is more your thing, but if they're ever down our way and they wanted to visit our Noank Historical Society, you open it up even if
Yes,
they.
I would prefer to be called, so I know you're coming.
Well, thank you.
Otherwise,
What a kind invitation.
You're gonna get a visit.
Yeah.
Be-
But
Before you
can I
go.
ask one
Please,
question?
yes.
Did you have a high school to go to, or did you have to go elsewhere?
We're at the Hyannis,
The regional.
By
yeah.
by a
Hyannis.
bus?
yeah, on the bus, yeah.
And all girls were able to go? Because I know in
Oh, yeah.
in our area, earlier, a generation earlier, World War I era, many girls didn't go beyond 8th grade. Because our
We were
school
liberated.
systems in town of, all of Connecticut, I guess,
Right.
so were
Right.
private high schools.
1940.
Oh, really?
Well, they are here, we got them here too.
They were here at that time.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's
Again,
an
thank
interesting
you.
difference, yeah, yeah.
Could I ask one?
Well, thank you all. Round of applause for our.
David, restroom,
Yes, right there.
before going
Yes,
back, I
right-
need to.
Right there.
There's a high-
Bob, you had a question?
Well, my question is, since we've got some folks here who were around during Prohibition, ladies and gentlemen, while there was work being done on the Burgess House barn in the last month and a half, they tore up the old concrete slab, which was failing in the main bay of the garage or barn that had been put down in the early mid-1940s by the Burgess family. And underneath there, they discovered a large brick cistern with a steel or iron oblong opening that was about man size. And the thing was about 8 or 9, 10 feet deep, clean as a whistle, in the wrong place to have been septic system. And the imagination wanders a little bit and stumbles upon the possibility that, okay, so here's my question. Do any of you recall anyone, other than dear relatives, who might have been in the business back in Prohibition times, who might have used the Burgess barn as a drop-off, haul-out stash place? And if you don't want to do it in public session, I'd just love to know anecdotally if you remember anything like that. Because it's an era and a subject that really animates people's imaginations, and it's really fun to stumble on something like that when you can't find any other good explanation.
I don't know anything about that, but there was a man who worked in when we had the liquor store in the summer times in back of the market.
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
Yes, and he used to be a runner for bringing the liquor in from Prince Cove.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and bringing it up here.
Sure, I was sure it was around, so I mean, it wasn't every village.
I know
out
Wilbur
there.
talks about seeing mysterious lights down on the pole.
Yes.
Oh, no, he was a
Taking
little
it
kid.
off.
He was a kid at
No,
that time.
that was in the liquor.
Yeah.
Please help yourself to some punch and cookies, and we can stay around
Thank you,
and chat
David.
as well. Thank you.
Thank you
Pam,
for-
thank you.